The war in West Asia has entered its sixth week, with strikes and counterstrikes continuing to escalate across the region. Israel has targeted Iran's largest petrochemical complex. Iranian forces have responded with missile and drone attacks on the neighboring countries, and the human cost of this conflict is now mounting rapidly. Let's break it down for you. Israel has struck Iran's largest petrochemical complex at South Pars, dealing a severe economic blow to Tehran just a while back. Remember, explosions were heard at the South Pars petrochemical facility. Key infrastructure providing electricity, water and oxygen to the complex was targeted in these attacks. However, the main petrochemical company remains undamaged, although power to all the units was cut. A petrochemical complex in Marvdasht, near the city of Shiraz, has been hit as well. In fact, a fire broke out at the complex after the strike. The Marvdasht county's governor has confirmed this attack. However, the governor has said that only a small section of the facility has sustained damage. On the military front, Israel announced the killing of Asghar Bagheri in an airstrike. Bagheri was the commander of the Quds Force Special Operations Unit. The Quds Force, remember, is the foreign operations arm of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. The damage was also reported near Sharif University of Technology, which is one of Iran's leading science institutions, often compared with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in America. Retaliatory strikes by Iran have targeted the neighboring countries. In Kuwait, a missile and drone attack injured 6 civilians, while the Gulf nations' air defenses worked to intercept further projectiles. 4 people have been confirmed dead after an Iranian ballistic missile struck a residential building in Haifa, with rescue teams recovering all the victims from the rubble. Meanwhile, in the United Arab Emirates, air defenses intercepted 12 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles and 19 drones, with 4 people injured in Abu Dhabi. On to Lebanon, where smoke billowed after strikes near villages in the Nabateh area. News agencies are reporting that the strike was on the Hezbollah stronghold, which was largely emptied of residents following repeated Israeli attacks and evacuation warnings. The United States Central Command released footage showing a drone down by the American forces. It states that the drone was used by the Iranian regime to threaten Americans and indiscriminately target civilians in the neighboring countries. Meanwhile, Donald Trump asserts that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon and that the regime change goal of United States has been achieved. Now, the 6-week war has already taken a heavy toll. Iran reports over 3,500 have been killed and 26,500 have been injured. Lebanon says 1,461 people have been killed, 4,430 injured, while Iraq has 109 killed and Israel has 32 killed but nearly 7,000 injured. Casualties have also been reported in the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Syria, Oman, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, as well as Jordan. The human cost of this escalation has been staggering. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic front, Iran has rejected Washington's 15-point ceasefire proposal. Tehran has called the proposal as excessively demanding and says that it is pursuing its own demands. In fact, it also warned that a ceasefire could be used by opposing forces to regroup in the region. Iranian officials say that talks with Oman are focused on establishing safe passage protocols for vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, which is as global energy markets watch tensely. Now, all of this unfolds after just hours before Trump's latest deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz expires. The situation remains extremely volatile, with strikes and counterstrikes now continuing across the region. Leadership decisions in Tel Aviv, in Tehran, and in Washington, D.C. could determine whether this conflict escalates further or if diplomacy can halt the bloodshed. The balance of global power may be shifting, and it is not happening in Washington, Beijing, or Moscow. It may be unfolding in the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, leading to a critical question through the control of the world's energy lifeline. Is the war in West Asia turning Iran into a new global power? Because Iran's Revolutionary Guards have issued a stark warning. The IRGC says the Strait of Hormuz will, quote, never return to its former state. And this is not just rhetoric. This is also declaration of a new security order in the Persian Gulf by the IRGC, where Iran holds unprecedented leverage over global energy flows. Now, experts say that for decades, the assumption for global power came from GDP size and military strength. But that assumption, they say, is now under strain. Iran is emerging as a global power simply because it controls the most critical oil choke points on Earth. Nearly 20% of the world's oil passes through this very Strait of Hormuz. And right now, that flow is under severe stress. Shipping has slowed to a trickle. Risk premiums are soaring. Insurance markets are tightening. And Iran understands this leverage. It has made it clear that the strait will only fully reopen on its own terms. If damages from the war are fully compensated from a portion of toll revenues through Strait of Hormuz, and the situation could escalate further. Now, if US President Donald Trump strikes Iranian energy infrastructure, Tehran's allies like the Houthis are expected to respond by expanding this war into another critical choke point, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. This narrow passage connects the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean and carries up to 6 million barrels of oil daily, or around 5% of global oil supply annually. So if both Hormuz and Bab al-Mandeb are disrupted simultaneously, well, nearly a quarter of the global oil supply could face disruption, and the consequences would be immediate, potentially triggering a cascading energy shock. Oil prices could potentially surge toward $200 per barrel. Inflation could rise across continents, while supply chains and markets could spiral as well. And there is precedent to this. Following the war in Gaza, in solidarity with Palestine between 2023 and 25, Houthi attacks in the Red Sea led to shipping lines being rerouted via the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10 to 15 days to the journeys, increasing fuel costs by 30 to 40% per voyage, and pushing freight rates to 2 to 3 times the normal levels on the Asia-Europe routes. Now imagine that disruption multiplied across multiple choke points, that too at a time when the Gulf is already reeling under pressure. Strikes, remember, have targeted LNG hubs, mega refineries, and key export routes, hitting the very heart of global energy system. So this is no longer just a war in West Asia. This is a battle over the arteries of the global economy. And Iran, by tightening its grip on the Strait of Hormuz and other global choke points, may be redefining what it means to be a world power. West Asia is on tenterhooks. The US president is giving deadline after deadline to compel Iran for a deal, failing which United States will destroy its vital infrastructure. Tehran, though, remains unfazed, putting him in a fix. In a clear sign of frustration, Trump published an expletive-laden post on Sunday in which he threatened to destroy Iran's power plants and bridges if Iran doesn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz to all shipping. Just a few minutes ago, Trump reiterated that Tuesday is the final deadline from Iran. He's also repeated the possibility of taking control of Iran's oil. His first ultimatum to Iran was on the 21st of March, when he gave Iran 48 hours to reopen the Hormuz, failing which Iran's power plants would be obliterated. 2 days later, the American president changed his stance, announcing a pause on Iran's energy infrastructure till the 28th of March. As that date approached, he extended the deadline to the 6th of April, that's today. American strikes are continuing in full force, though. Blurring all red lines, America bombed the B-1 bridge connecting Tehran and Karaj, which is considered as Iran's tallest bridge. The Sharif University of Technology in Tehran was also attacked, causing a gas outage in parts of the Iranian capital. Since the beginning of the war, remember, the Iranian government has accused America and Israel of attacking over 30 universities. Now, this has not deterred Iran's military capabilities. While Trump has lauded the U.S. military over the rescue of the pilot and the weapons specialist of the F-15E fighter jet, which was shot down, this entire incident is yet another example of how the American president has underestimated Iran. The downing of the F-15E Strike Eagle reportedly marked the first incident of a U.S. fighter jet being shot down by enemy fire in over 20 years. On the very same day, Iran has also claimed to have destroyed one A-10 Warthog fighter aircraft, which fell in Kuwait. And this is not all. In the process of rescuing the officers stranded in Iran, United States ended up losing multiple aircraft. As per Iranian military, 2 Black Hawk helicopters and 2 C-130 aircraft were blown to pieces. It also said that an MQ-9 Reaper and a Hermes 900 drone had been destroyed as well over the Isfahan province. While United States is pushing for a ceasefire, remember, Iran has described it as a ruse for America and Israel to regroup for further strikes.
What does a ceasefire mean? A ceasefire means a pause for the US and Israel for a while to renew strength and prepare to commit crimes again. No sane person would accept this. Our demand is an end to the imposed war, along with ensuring that this cycle does not repeat.
With no easy way out to declare victory, Donald Trump is now caught in a bind. As the prospect of an escalation looms, it will be interesting to see how Trump outlines his future course of action in his press conference in some time from now. The war in West Asia is heating up. America and Israel are not just attacking military targets, even nuclear facilities are not off limits anymore. However, repeated attacks on the Bushehr nuclear power plant might have inadvertent consequences for US soldiers as well. One of the staff members at the Bushehr power plant was killed when a projectile struck the site on the 4th of April. A building on the premises was affected by shockwaves and fragments. Subsequently, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and the country's atomic energy chief, Mohammad El-Sami, shot off a letter to the UN, flagging a grave risk of radioactive contamination. They warned that the repercussions will not be restricted to Iran alone. Public health and ecological balance of the wider Gulf region can be endangered. This matters as the Bushehr power plant is much closer to the Gulf countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar and the UAE than Tehran. For instance, Tehran is located over 750 kilometers north of Bushehr, whereas Kuwait is barely 240 kilometers away. Similarly, the distance between this power plant and Bahrain's capital Manama is just 400 kilometers, and Qatar's Doha lies 450 kilometers to the south. With the US having multiple bases in these countries, American soldiers will obviously be at great risk of radiation exposure if the Bushehr plant is destroyed. International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi has called for a stop on the attacks targeting nuclear power plants. He has warned that continued military activity near this plant could cause a severe radiological incident with harmful consequences for people and environment in Iran and beyond its borders. Last year, remember, he had told the UNSC that measures like evacuation have to be taken within a radius extending up to several hundred kilometers in case the Bushehr nuclear reactor is hit. Now, why is this Bushehr power plant so vital? Let's tell you. It is Iran's first and only operational nuclear power facility, completed by Russia back in 2011. It is central to Iran's civilian nuclear energy program, as its pressured water reactor generates up to 1,000 megawatts of electricity. In 2019, Iran started a project to add 2 additional reactors to this site. Since the beginning of the West Asia war, it has been hit 4 times. On the 17th of March, the IAEA confirmed that a structure located 350 meters from the Bushehr plant was hit and destroyed. Then on the 24th of March, a projectile hit the premises of the Bushehr plant. Russia, which operates this facility, claimed that the plant's pumping station came under attack. It was again attacked 3 days later. The latest attack on Bushehr has also sparked Moscow's concerns. Russia's state nuclear firm, Rosatom, in fact, has evacuated 198 more personnel from the site, reportedly in coordination with the IDF. Prior to this, 163 staff members were already sent back to Russia. Iran retaliated to this aggression on the 21st of March when its missiles managed to breach Israel's air defense systems and struck Dimona, which is believed to host a nuclear facility. At least 64 people were injured in this attack. Now, with the American president threatening to destroy Iran's bridges and the power plants, it is clear that the threat of nuclear escalation cannot be taken lightly. President Donald Trump is facing intensifying political heat after his explosive Sunday Truth Social post targeting Iran. Now, a post that was not just fiery, but also laced with expletives and direct threats of military action. Just a while ago, Donald Trump defended his post, saying fiery words were needed to make a larger point to Iran. The message that was posted on Easter Sunday warned Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face with foul and derogative language. In fact, he's even threatened strikes on Iran's critical infrastructure like power plants and bridges. After the post, several critics, including insiders as well as lawmakers, reportedly began calling for considering Section 4 of the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, with several commentators demanding his impeachment. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wished Americans on Easter as he lambasted Trump, saying that the President of the United States is, quote, ranting like an unhinged madman on social media. In fact, Schumer added that Trump was threatening possible war crimes and alienating allies, and that the country deserved so much better. Not just him, Democrat leader Bernie Sanders also echoed similar tones, pointing out Trump's remarks as ravings of a dangerous and mentally unbalanced individual. He also called upon Congress to act so the war could end. While Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, also a Democrat, noted that it was not the first time that the 79-year-old Trump had used stark language. Kaine said that explicit threats to bomb Iran into Stone Age are embarrassing and juvenile, suggesting that there was a clear absence of plan and rationale within the Trump administration. So what is this provision? Let's tell you. And why is it suddenly at the center of a fiery political debate in Washington? Well, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment provides a constitutional mechanism to remove a president who is deemed unfit to discharge the duties of office. Now, it can be triggered by the vice president and a majority of the cabinet, who formally declare the president as incapable. And once that happens, the vice president immediately becomes the acting president. Now, the president can challenge this decision, but if that happens, the final call shifts to the Congress. The roots of this amendment go back to a moment of national trauma. the assassination of John F. Kennedy back in 1963. It exposed a critical gap in the American Constitution. What happens if a president is unable to serve but cannot declare it? In response, the Congress proposed this amendment in 1965. Section 4 was specifically designed for situations where a president is incapacitated but unwilling or unable to step aside. But this powerful provision, remember, comes with serious concerns. Critics warn that it could be politically misused, not just for incapacity, but to remove an unpopular leader as well. There is no clear definition of what inability actually means, leaving room for subjective interpretation. The process itself raises questions. The vice president and the cabinets who stand to gain power are the ones who initiate it. And strikingly, there is no formal role for medical experts, making this a deeply political and not purely medical decision. And this is why Section 4 remains the most debated and sensitive part of the 25th Amendment. The American Constitution does not clearly define incapacity. It can include serious physical or mental inability to govern. It may also extend to extreme situations like capture or disappearance during war. But ultimately, the term is left intentionally vague, allowing flexibility, but also opening the door to dispute. Now, calls to invoke Section 4 against President Trump may be growing, but the reality is that Section 4 is an extraordinary constitutional tool designed for extreme circumstances and not every political crisis. On Easter, Trump went on social media before heading to his golf course in Virginia. He threatened Iran of opening the Strait of Hormuz using the F word. Donald Trump's Sunday social media post has drawn shock and scrutiny across Washington and around the world. And what makes this incident stand out is not just the direct military implications, but how rare it is for a sitting U.S. president to drop the F word in public communications. But Trump is not the first president to use coarse language privately or off mic. Historical records show that presidents have cursed behind closed doors, and occasional hot mic moments have captured expletives as well from leaders, including Jimmy Carter, but they were not deliberate on camera or part of the official statements. Now, Trump has repeatedly broken this norm. In June 2025, he openly used the F word while speaking with reporters about ceasefire violations in the West, saying that the combatants don't know what the F they are doing. In October 2025, he used it during a White House press conference alongside President Volodymyr Zelensky. When asked about Nicolas Maduro, which was yet to be removed as the president of Venezuela that time, Trump said, using the F word, that Maduro doesn't want to mess around with the United States. In fact, Trump also deployed the F-bomb several times in his second term. He used it in an interview with Time magazine in October last year to illustrate his tough negotiating tactic with Hamas. Not only the use of these derogatory words, Trump is also known for mocking world leaders. Recently, remember, he's mocked the French president Emmanuel Macron over a very personal issue. Trump even took it further during an important summit in Miami when he sparked global controversy with crude remarks directed at the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. His use of the F word has sometimes coincided with tangible outcomes. Reporters note that on prior occasions, when he used blunt language against Hamas over hostage negotiations or toward jailed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, or even in West Asia tensions, subsequent developments included the release of hostages, political shifts, and de-escalations have even taken place. But whether such profanity helps or hurts his policy goals remains debated. His recent Iran post, combining threats of strikes on infrastructure and a very public use of profane language, has prompted questions about his diplomacy, the president's state of mind, and the potential risks of escalating rhetoric. They're all being debated now. All right, coming up on Gravitas on the other side, we tell you why Washington is pulling weapons from across the world to sustain the war in West Asia. And for about 40 minutes, the 4 astronauts in Artemis will be alone in space, having lost their link with Earth. We get you all about it on the other side. The war in West Asia, now in its 6th week, has been intensifying. Tehran is under relentless attack. Iranian forces are striking back hard. In the latest, 4 people have died in Haifa, while Tel Aviv and parts of central Israel have suffered damages. Our next report brings you the latest from the battle zone. Take a look.
Across Israel, the skies lit up with streaks of incoming fire. Air defenses scrambled, interceptors rushed. But this time, several missiles slipped through. What followed was devastation. Iran has unleashed a fresh wave of missile attacks targeting key Israeli cities. Haifa took a direct hit. There was death and destruction. Buildings ripped open. Windows blown out. Streets covered in debris. Emergency crews rushed through smoke-filled alleys, pulling survivors from the wreckage. Residential areas in Tel Aviv and Petah Tikva in central Israel also came under attack.
The car of my parents just exploded. Yeah, it was terrifying. It felt like I'm losing control. It feels like I don't know what is going to happen. Yeah, I think the war. That's the price of the war.
Iran says it will continue to launch its retaliatory strikes and warns Israel and the US against targeting its civilian areas.
If attacks on civilian targets are repeated, the next phases of our offensive and retaliatory operations will be carried out much more forcefully and on a wider scale, and their losses and damages, if they persist in this approach, will be multiplied.
Israel also warns Iran against targeting civilian areas and says it has killed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' intelligence chief.
The Revolutionary Guard is shooting at civilians, and we are eliminating the leaders of the terrorists. Iran's leaders live with a sense of being targeted. We will continue to hunt them down one by one.
With its targeted strikes, analysts say that Iran is now using more cruise missiles and multi-headed missiles, which are harder to intercept. The US and Israel have been claiming to have severely crippled the Iranian military, but the repeated waves of missiles and drones show that Iran still maintains its firepower to give punishing blows. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
America's war machine is under pressure. Stockpiles are shrinking as the Iran war enters week 6. And now, Washington is pulling weapons from across the world to sustain this fight. This comes at a time when the war's intensity is rising despite weeks of bombardment. Remember, Iran continues to retain its arsenal of missiles and drones. Our next report gets you all the details.
For weeks, the world has watched the explosions, the airstrikes, the firepower. But behind the scenes, a different battle is unfolding, a battle of supply. Now, the United States is diverting critical weapons from global stockpiles to West Asia, among them the powerful JASSM-Air long-range cruise missiles. More than 1,000 have already been reportedly fired in strikes targeting Iran. With a range exceeding 960 kilometers, the JASSM-Air missile enables standoff strikes, allowing aircraft to engage targets without entering heavily defended airspace. It is typically launched from strategic bombers such as the B-1B Lancer and B-52 Stratofortress, as well as select fighter jets. The order of deploying majority of its lethal long-range missiles against Iran has come amid US President Trump's claim that Iran's capabilities have been completely decimated. In West Asia, Iran continues to unleash its arsenal of drones and missiles. Each projectile fired by Iran forces Israel and US to fire interceptors to hunt them down. The US had been having issues with supplies of missile interceptors and long-range strike weapons since the beginning of the war. Replacing what has been used would take years of production, as the production lines have a limit, but with the war showing no signs of abating, the American arsenal is feeling the strain. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Tonight we talk about what isn't being talked about. Chinese military strategist and philosopher Sun Tzu writes in his book, The Art of War, that all war is deception. America and Israel know that in 2026, wars aren't being fought just on battlefields. The information war is a reality. And the lack of information is now increasingly becoming a weapon in this war. Multiple reports suggest that the US military is refusing to disclose the true extent of the damage and casualties which it has suffered in the war against Iran. For instance, an analysis by news portal The Intercept puts the number of American soldiers killed or injured since the 28th of February at about 750. That's a combine of killed and injured. But the official number of fatalities by the White House stands at 13 killed and 365 injured. When the portal contacted the Pentagon, they simply refused to acknowledge this figure. The survey also states that defense officials are now murmuring about what they call is a casualty cover-up by the US military. You see, at the start of this war, when American-Israeli strikes had caused heavy damage to Iran, the US Central Command, or CENTCOM, which oversees the operations in West Asia, used to post several videos on its X handle showing the damage that was inflicted. In fact, they also gave updates on the soldiers killed. But now, those posts have reduced and the numbers aren't being given. Another development that America has been silent on is many of its military personnel reportedly relocating to hotels and other buildings amid the Iranian strikes on US bases in Gulf countries. Earlier, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi had posted, and I quote, US soldiers fled military bases to hide in hotels and offices. CENTCOM has also reportedly refused to confirm how many American bases have been hit in the Gulf countries. Israel has also been accused of hiding the extent of damage and casualties, but these restrictions aren't new. In the 12-day war in June last year, the head of Israel's military censor, Brigadier General Kobi Mandelblit, had issued a circular announcing new rules on what Israeli journalists can and cannot publish about the impact of Iranian strikes. Those guidelines included a ban on sharing of videos from social media without prior review by the censor. So the question now is, will we ever know the truth of this war? An admission from US President Donald Trump is now putting the spotlight on a failed shadowy operation inside Iran. Remember, Trump says that Washington secretly sent weapons to Iranian protesters via the Kurds. But those guns may never have reached their target. In an interview, Trump claimed that the United States, in his words, dispatched a lot of guns to Iranian demonstrators through Kurdish intermediaries. But the plan appears to have backfired. The American president said that he believes that the Kurds held on to the weapons instead of delivering them to the protesters on ground. Several Iranian Kurdish opposition groups have now reportedly denied the American president's claim of actually arming them. In fact, just a short while back, while speaking at the White House Easter egg roll, Trump said that guns were sent for Iranian people, but certain groups kept them. He also added that he was very upset and, in his words, the groups are, quote, going to be paying a big price for that. Now, the Kurds, remember, are an ethnic group consisting of around 25 to 30 million people spread across Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Armenia. They don't have an independent state and have formal autonomy in northern Iraq. Now, Trump's revelation is raising more questions than one because, remember, it suggests that even as American diplomats were engaged in talks with Iranian officials, a parallel covert operation was underway, one which was aimed at arming dissent within Iran. Across Iran, remember, protesters took to the streets starting December last year, angry over soaring inflation, corruption, and a collapsing currency. Those protests quickly spread across more than 100 cities, marking one of the largest waves of unrest in Iran in decades. Now, remember, at the time, Trump had publicly backed these protesters, promising that help was on the way and warning Tehran of severe consequences if the crackdown continues. However, it was never disclosed back then that his administration may have tried to arm those demonstrators as well. Now, his latest statement suggests that the operation failed before it could even begin. Remember that one of America's war goals was to spur an uprising against the Iranian regime, and that has not materialized. Instead of a revolution, thousands of Iranians continue to rally in support of the government and not against them. Earlier this year, reports had also claimed that the CIA was exploring options to support the Kurdish militias as a way to spark a broader uprising against the Iranian regime. Those discussions were set to follow contacts with Kurdish leaders based near the Iran-Iraq border, with Israeli networks allegedly helping facilitate those connections. So with these new claims, an important question now emerges. Did a secret American plan to fuel dissent collapse before it even began? Or did it just simply fall into the wrong hands? Right, shifting our focus now to Nepal, where the country is witnessing the impact of the global fuel crisis that has been triggered by the West Asian war. It has now announced measures for government schools and offices to cut fuel consumption as petrol prices surge and supplies remain tight. Earlier, remember, the Nepalese government offices and schools worked 6 days a week from Sunday till Friday. But now it will be 5 days a working week. That means holidays will now be observed on Saturdays and Sundays. Officials say the move is aimed at reducing fuel consumption amid disrupted petroleum supplies. The cabinet has also decided to prepare a legal framework to convert petrol and diesel vehicles into electric ones. Officials say this move will speed up Nepal's transition towards clean energy and reduce dependence on imported fuel. Petrol prices in Nepal, remember, have risen sharply, standing at around 202 rupees per litre in the domestic market. Offices in Nepal will now operate from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. to improve efficiency and save up on fuel. The crisis has worsened due to disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, which is, as we all know, a crucial route for nearly 20% of global oil supply. Asian countries depend heavily on West Asian oil, making them vulnerable to the supply shocks. And Nepal, in particular, relies entirely on fuel imports from India. On to other updates now. Global uncertainty has been growing amid a spate of ongoing wars. In the wake of Russia's attack on Ukraine, Germany has now been trying to boost its military prowess, but its new military service law has sparked a row. Protests have raged over the recently passed Military Service Modernization Act in Germany, which is being perceived by critics as a pathway towards full conscription. Now, a rather controversial clause in this law has come to the fore. As per this law, men aged between 18 and 45 years have to seek the military's approval to go abroad for over 3 months. This rule will apply regardless of whether a German man is planning to work in another country or study abroad. While the German government has justified this as a requirement to ascertain the number of men living outside the country, long term, many young people have hit the streets in protest, viewing this as a restriction on their rights. While conscription was outlawed in Germany in 2011, remember, it has made a comeback in other European countries like Lithuania, Sweden, Latvia and Croatia over the last decade.
Well, I think it's absolutely rubbish. It's yet another restriction on our rights. And it's clear to us that war always means a restriction on our rights. This time, our freedom of movement. We see it everywhere. Police powers are being expanded, for example. And that's really rubbish. And that's what we're fighting against here at the Peace March.
Und da kämpfen wir gegen hier auf dem Ostermarsch.
Let's look at some of the other key aspects to this law. It aims at raising the number of soldiers on active duty from 180,000 to 260,000 by 2035. The law also entails 18-year-old men to compulsorily complete a questionnaire which assesses their motivation and suitability for service in the German military. From the 1st of July 2027 onward, all men born in 2008 and after will have to undergo a mandatory medical evaluation so that the military can ascertain the pool of potential recruits. Earlier in March, thousands of German teenagers skipped school and gathered in Berlin to demonstrate against the alleged attempt by the government to implement conscription. Shifting our focus to Afghanistan now, where devastating floods have been wreaking havoc across the country. At least 99 people have been killed and 157 have been injured as weeks of heavy rains trigger widespread destruction across more than 20 provinces. Authorities say nearly 6,000 families have been impacted. Thousands of families have lost their homes, farmland, and access to basic supplies. More than 3,600 homes have been destroyed so far. 300 kilometers of roads have been damaged, making relief operations difficult. In a separate incident, meanwhile, 6 children were killed after roofs collapsed in the flood-hit areas of Nangarhar, with 7 others injured. Security forces rushed to the site and shifted the injured to the hospitals. Heavy rains have paralyzed transport as well. In Zindajan, many trucks are stranded on flooded highways connecting Herat to Islam Kala. Drivers are stuck in the desert for days with limited food and water.
Drivers are forced to stay here. As I mentioned before, the main problem for all of us is the price of fuel. If a heavy truck turns back from here towards Herat, it costs around 2,500 Afghanis $39 just for fuel. The drivers have no choice but to stay here in the desert, whether we are hungry or thirsty, even if it takes 2 or 3 days.
The European Union says it will continue providing life-saving assistance, but aid agencies warn that needs are growing fast, as seasonal floods and fragile infrastructure leave Afghanistan highly vulnerable to natural disasters. Well, let's talk about the Artemis. The Artemis astronauts entered the final phase of their run-up to a lunar flyby. Right now, the moon's gravity is having a stronger pull on the spacecraft than Earth's. Soon, for a brief moment, it will vanish, entering a zone where no one can reach it. Take a look.
4 astronauts are hurtling toward the moon, traveling at a speed of about 40,000 kilometers per hour. The Orion capsule will now whip around the moon, setting the crew up to travel farther from our home planet than any human before. The spacecraft has entered what scientists call the lunar sphere of influence, a region where the gravity of the moon takes over from Earth. From here, the trajectory is no longer governed by home. It is shaped by the moon itself.
Our mission continues to go incredibly well. Our crew is healthy as we prepare and gear up to fly by the moon tomorrow.
Inside the Orion capsule, the crew of 3 Americans and 1 Canadian. Victor Glover will go down in the books as the first person of color to ever fly around the moon, and Christina Koch will be the first woman.
We are coming up on the flyby tomorrow. We're getting really excited to hear the crew observations. We've heard some observations, Lori highlighted them, from when the moon was much smaller out the window than it's going to be tomorrow.
As the spacecraft approach, the moon reveals a face rarely seen, the far side. Often misunderstood as the dark side, it is not always dark. Sunlight reaches it, but it never faces Earth. For the first time in decades, humans are seeing vast regions of this hidden hemisphere directly. As Orion moves behind the moon, communication gets cut off. It's a planned blackout. Roughly 40 minutes where Earth cannot reach its crew. No signals pass through the lunar mass. Artemis 2 is not landing on the moon. It is a pathfinder. Testing limits, relearning risks, preparing for a permanent human return. Once Artemis 2 leaves the lunar neighborhood, it will take 4 days to return home with a splashdown in the Pacific near San Diego on 10th April.
A group of amateur astronomers has heard a signal from 25 billion kilometers away, confirming that NASA's Voyager 1 is still transmitting signals from the outer reaches of the solar system. Our next report tells you how the spacecraft is whispering back from the outer reaches of the solar system.
In a vast, silent expanse of deep space, stars flicker and a faint golden speck drifts endlessly into darkness. Over 25 billion kilometers away from the Earth, beyond Neptune and Pluto, beyond the Sun's protective embrace, in the cold silence of interstellar space, a faint whisper, barely detectable, has stunned astronomers. A signal from Voyager 1, a spacecraft launched nearly half a century ago. It sends its engineering signal at 8.4 GHz, which is far less forgiving for an old metal mesh dish. For decades, only NASA's Deep Space Network handled this kind of listening. But for the first time, a team of amateur astronomers using the historic Dwingaloo radio telescope have managed to detect the ultra-faint carrier signal, a gentle reminder that Voyager 1 is still talking to us from the interstellar space. Voyager 1 is an engineering marvel of 1977. Built on technologies that are considered primitive today but were chosen for their rugged reliability against cosmic radiation and extreme temperatures. Voyager 1 operates with less computing power than a modern digital watch, yet it remains the most distant human-made object in space. Built at a time when computers filled entire rooms, when memory was measured in kilobytes, not gigabytes, its total memory is less than a single image one would send on WhatsApp today. In contrast, a smartphone has nearly 200,000 times more memory. NASA says Voyager 1's 3 nuclear-powered generators are steadily fading. Engineers at the space agency have begun turning off instruments one by one to keep the essentials alive for as long as possible. But Voyager 1 is whispering back. It is no longer just a spacecraft. It is a time capsule, a survivor drifting through eternity carrying our story into the unknown. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas. But before we go, we're leaving you with some interesting visuals. Cambodia has unveiled the world's first statue honoring Magawa, the landmine-sniffing rat who has saved countless lives. Born in Tanzania and trained by Belgium non-profit Apopo, Magawa detected over 100 landmines and helped clear more than 141,000 square meters of dangerous land. He was awarded the PDSA Gold Medal for Animal Bravery. He died in 2022 at the age of 8. Take a look at that. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
5 states, one powerful voice.
From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal,
Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall